Okay, it's day 176. It is Thursday, August 18th, and we're going to do something a little bit different today. Normally, I try to triangulate on all the different news sources. So, Reuters and Interfax Ukraine and Russian news sources and American and British. And I try to do that so that I can give you a complete picture of what we're looking at. Today I want to do something a little bit different. I'm going to look at all Ukrainian news sources until we get to the end and then look at some fun with Pravda and RT just because I've done that traditionally now for quite a few episodes. And if you have any question about where I stand, look at this image. I stand with Ukraine. Ukraine is clearly the victim here, and I'm not going to try to pretend like there is some false equivalence that there's not. Okay, so here, this is the first thing I want to start with. This is Interfax Ukraine. As most of these articles come from Interfax Ukraine. As a result of enemy strikes on Kharkiv, 19 people are killed, according to the prosecutor's office. This was overnight from Wednesday into Thursday morning, and there was just brutal shelling of civilians. I mean, that's what it amounts to, because the Russians just indiscriminately shell, and shame on them, and they should be ashamed for years to come for what they're doing. This is BBC, or sorry, Guardian footage of it, but it's just showing the picture of what has happened here, and it's brutal. Radio Free Europe also triangulating on this. The Kharkiv shelling, Zelensky wrote on Telegram, a vile and cynical attack on civilians that has no justification and demonstrates the powerlessness of the aggressor. We will not forgive. We will take revenge. Now, there's also in Kherson, there's action in the east. In Donbass, there's action in Kharkiv and in very northeast of the country, and that's the shelling missile strikes. And then in the south, the Ukrainian presidential advisor Olensky Astrovich said in a video message, what we're seeing is a strategic deadlock. Okay, so they announced the attack, and then Russians have moved their forces there, so it's going to be a little bit different until they can get some more supplies or longer range weapons. Okay, this is Reuters talking about diplomacy. Zelensky has met with, sorry, Zelensky was meeting with Guterres. He's the head of the UN, and they're talking about the atomic energy situation at Zaporizhia. Turkey's President Erdogan also joined them in talks in Lviv, and said they discuss different ways of ending the war, and you'll see this in the Interfax article. So here's Zelensky and Guterres. We also discussed the possible directions of development of the issue of illegal and forced deportation of Ukrainians, the release of our military personnel and the medics from captivity. That still hasn't happened. The POW camp that was what looks like a false flag operation from Russia, bombed it so that they could kill a bunch of prisoners, and then blame the Ukrainians for that. They still have not let the UN or the Red Cross in. The topic of Russia nuclear blackmail also came up, and that's going to become a big theme here. Ukraine, Turkey signed a memo of post-war reconstruction. The Memorandum of Understanding and the Restoration of Infrastructure provides Turkey's participation in war reconstruction. And this is Zelensky, I think, talking Turkey is our strategic ally. We're grateful for Turkish partners and their willingness to cooperate in restoring the infrastructure destroyed by Russia. They have extensive experience in the construction of roads and bridges, and you'll see more of this kind of talk here between Zelensky and Erdogan. Discussed the Russian theft of Ukrainian grain. Now, this I thought was really interesting. The invaders appropriated, again, this is Interfax, so this is the Ukrainian perspective. Invaders appropriated almost 500,000 tons of grain. Now, that's a lot. Now, there's roughly, I think, 20 million, if I have my facts straight, tons of grain that need to go out to the market. So that's still 500,000 is quite a chunk of that. Russia's attempts to sell stolen goods must be stopped, Zelensky said, and the leaders also discussed the situation around Zaporizhia. Okay. IAEA mission, the International Mission of the Atomic Energy Agency, IAEA, can be sent to Zaporizhia nuclear power plant. Ukraine is ready to ensure proper control. Okay, so that's good from the Ukrainian side, but there's another component to this. According to Zelensky, Russia must withdraw from the territory of the nuclear power plant and all neighboring areas and take away its military equipment from the plant. And that's good enough, but Russia even if they agree to it, they haven't done it. And Russia holds the territory. They could let them in at any time, and they haven't. And they haven't, and they probably won't, even though they're calling for it, but they're not going to actually do anything. Okay, let me turn our attention to something else. Fitch's ratings has upgraded Ukraine's long-term foreign currency. And so they upgraded to a CC from restricted default, which is essentially a D or, okay, so how does this work? Um, Here, the U.S. has an AAA rating. Okay, that's Fitch's affirms the U.S. AAA rating. Here's the chart. So AA is all the way to here, and CC was upgraded from in default, so it's up here. I mean, so it's really in bad shape, and of course it's in bad shape because I mean, you've just been pummeled for the last 6 months, and it didn't start out in AA. It started out somewhere in the middle and had some issues, but here it's just been taking a pounding. Okay, now that leads us to Russia's rating. Here we see Fitch downgrades Russia to B. So Russia at least started somewhere up here in from above this line. It downgraded down to a B, and that was early in March. Then it downgraded to a C in March 8th, and then Fitch withdraws Russia's rating, so they won't even rate it anymore because of sanctions. So that's where Russia is. Okay, speaking of Russia, this is Pravda RU, and now everything I've done before was showing the Ukrainian perspective, but I always like to end with Pravda and RT because they're just so almost laughable in propaganda. Chinese yuan leaves the US dollar behind on Moscow exchange. That's because the US dollar left the Moscow exchange behind. The Chinese yuan has left the US dollar behind in volume of tomorrow's transactions during trading on the Moscow exchange. Well, this is less about how awesome you are, Russia, and more about how China is going to be your big brother in the future. So I don't know that I would be bragging about. The same thing in RT. The yuan ruble trading has outpaced the dollar ruble trading for the first time. And I think the author of the article thinks they're poking the US in the eye, but they're actually kind of poking themselves in the eye. And it's not good. Okay, last one. Russia urges international inspection of shelled nuclear site. And here, like I said earlier, we would like such as IAEA mission to take place soon. Russia will do its best to facilitate it. No, they won't. No, they won't. The POWs, you still haven't let the UN in from the POW explosion that you blamed on HIMARS. So they lie. I mean, that's what's going on here. But they get propaganda value out of this, and every Ukrainian knows it. Most Westerners know it. But I don't know how many people in Russia actually know it because they say things like this: people should not attack nuclear sites, should not use artillery and other weapons against nuclear power plants. Vinnyshevsky stressed. The Ukrainian side knows it very well and nevertheless does it, effectively committing acts of nuclear terrorism. What Russia does is accuse their opponents of doing the very same thing that they do. So that's how I'm going to end it. Thank you for your time. Today was just the Ukrainian perspective. Tomorrow I'll be back to looking through different news cycles from different angles as we try to triangulate on the truth of what's going on in Ukraine.